I don't usually talk about love or relationships on this channel, primarily for the fact that one, I think it just makes me feel uncomfortable, but two, this channel is connected to my main vlog channel, which I know people that know me follow, and I think sometimes I get nervous. So someone will stumble on this, and someone I know sees me being vulnerable. It's like that's a risk I could be taken advantage of. That can be used against me. I don't think most people, except for like my close circle, know this side of me in terms of how much I ponder, how much I reflect. But I just filmed a video, which we'll see if it goes live or not, that I was just thinking to be labeled like letter to my ex or something. I don't know how I'm thinking about love right now. I wasn't thinking about this at all. I was just thinking about life and being overwhelmed. And for some reason, a lot of times when I just think about life or I'm anxious about something else, I think about my love life, which is a little sad because I don't know why relationships take such a precedent in my life, because they're not the biggest thing. I got way bigger things I need to worry about. But for some reason, I'm thinking about this. And I was like, you know what? Let me record it. It's 5 a.m., 5:30 a.m. I'm just like, let me record anything I'm thinking. I think my relationship with just people in general, not necessarily romantic, but just people, is a little twisted, or not twisted, but I don't really know. I think that people and our connections are biological. I think we need to be around each other. That's what humans are, how we're wired. And there's a social need, a sense of biological genetic satisfaction that we acquire from being around other people. But I do feel like sometimes I walk myself into situations because of an inability to be satisfied with myself, or because of how much I think and ponder and just and constantly reflecting on other people. And I'm always going back and forth between whether or not I'm like an extrovert or an introvert. I think depending on who you ask, if you were to ask my ex, she'd probably say an introvert, but she probably knew the most about me. I think some people would say extrovert because of my energy. I'll pretty giggly, I'm goofy, I'm a class clown type of guy sometimes. I am not afraid to introduce myself to people in a new room. But I think from my perspective, answering that question depends on like where you get your energy from. I think I get my energy in situations where I'm alone. As much as I like being with people and that can bring me happiness, that's not where I get my like fuel, I guess. I get very overwhelmed sometimes being around people because I'm like, damn, like I need time to just like turn my brain off for just to think about life. I can't always be in it. It feels like when you're in a play and you need to stop acting. And it's not that I'm acting with other people, but it's just, that's action. Anytime I'm not thinking, I'm in action. And I know this is going all over the place, but I think going back to relationships, let me just summarize my experience with people in general. This might be a long video, but when I was younger, I was very shy, very much the type of guy that I was afraid of talking to certain people, very quiet, very sensitive, crying a lot. I liked my family, obviously, but even sometimes I didn't feel the most comfortable around them. I felt like my parents looked at me as soft, which to some extent is maybe true, but I still didn't feel good. The person who I was closest to in my life was my sister. I'm not gonna lie, I don't know how I would have got through my childhood without her. I feel like any struggles I had with school or my parents, knowing that she had been through it or could be there for me, got me through everything. So anytime me and her got into an argument, that shit really fucked me up because I was like, damn, my only support system. You know what I'm saying? Like, but yeah, I've always been a very emotional kid, very reflective type of person where, so I get in an argument with my parents, I'm writing paragraphs in a journal to them. I don't know how I would like if I had a kid like me, I don't know how I'd parent them generally, but Um, at some point toward middle school, I started to become a little bit more reflective on how my perspective of the world impacts my reality. And I started to try to have intention to be more optimistic, even if it was blind optimism or like delusional. I just tried a bit harder. And I became somehow a big part of it because of the YouTubers and content I watched made me more inspired to just be a little bit more silly in the world outside of myself. You know, I've always been a goofy guy. That's always been like I've always been like type of person who's like I make my family laugh. I've always been a little oddball, slightly autistic. But I think I became a little bit more comfortable doing that outside of just my close circle. And especially in the high school, I was very goofy. I had the YouTube channels. I feel like in high school, a lot of times I started to get clowned for it because I think that's when people started to develop more. I don't want to say mature, 'cause I think I was mature then, but I guess more. They just started to develop specific perspectives on how they want to be viewed that were a little bit more like they started to care more about other people. You know, people weren't as silly once we got to high school, and definitely not here in college. And in high school, I went in with this mindset of like, you know, I want to be as friends with everyone. I had that in middle school too, and I felt like I was starting to get disappointed. And going back to this whole girls argument thing, I think for some reason when I was younger, I had this perspective that like girls weren't like real humans, or like not literally, but like that they weren't flawed. I spent a lot of time growing up with my mom and my sister, and I don't want to go into details about everything in my family, but I felt kind of because of my relationship with them that there was an obligation that I had to be a gentleman. I had to treat women a certain way so that they didn't feel like how my mom and my sister felt in certain situations or things I'd seen them go through. And so I feel like I had this like perspective of like, okay, like I'm gonna be this gentleman type guy. You know, people always talk about this nice guy, and I think that's an oversimplification, but that was kind of how I envisioned it. Like I'm gonna be that guy. And then when I started to meet people that didn't necessarily respect that, you know, whether it's romantic or even friendships, like even with guys, like friendships that didn't respect like my perspective on life, it was really like, damn, like even when I'm trying to get out my shell, it doesn't always work out. And that was very eye opening for me because I was like, damn, I am partly the problem, but I'm not fully the problem. You know, I can't be friends with everyone. And especially towards 10th grade in high school, you know, this is after I tried talking to some girls and I felt led on. I was very dramatic at the time, I'm not gonna lie. But I started getting to a point where I was like, okay, I'm gonna completely isolate myself. You know, I didn't post on Instagram for like a year. I stopped doing my YouTube channel. I just really stopped like putting myself out there as much. I was very pessimistic. My journals were very pessimistic. Oh my God, I wish I had them right now. I like the way I thought about girls was like, I was just like, not girls in general, but the girls in my school. I'm like, girls are fake. All these guys, I don't like them. They're like, they don't care. Oh my God, I just did not like people, bro. And that's something I still struggle with. So sometimes I still feel so isolated from people. And I feel like the isolation is why I have these thoughts sometimes. But then I met my girlfriend, and I was long distance, but that really changed my perspective on people because even though it was long distance, and I didn't even go into that situation with the intention of it becoming anything, but that was the closest I've ever gotten to a person in my life till this day. And it's weird, and partly it's like it feels embarrassing in my head. I'm like, damn, this long distance relationship. I didn't meet her in person, but majority of it, you know, it's just online, and I'm like, damn, this is the closest I've ever been to someone. But it's also like, damn, that situation really proves something to me, that there is a level of understanding beyond what I assume. And also it proved to me that I placed too high expectations on the world. You know, I don't think anyone could have predicted that I was depressed or I was going through stuff in high school, because outwardly I'm hanging out with people, outwardly I'm enjoying their company, and outwardly, you know, we're vibing, but in my head I'm placing this expectation that like, oh, we're not close enough, or they're fake because it's not a certain level I want it to be. But I think to some extent I didn't accept the world for what it was. I had this expectation of what the world was supposed to be. And I'm still do have that tendency, especially with relationships I have now. But I'm trying to overcome it. You know, I'm in college now. That relationship ended a while ago. But when it ended, it really made me examine, because I feel like I placed such high expectations on her. I feel like I expected her to be this perfect symbol rather than a person. And that's why a lot of times when I felt like she wasn't perfect, in my eyes at the time, not saying now, but in the time, or when something happened that hurt my feelings, it really like destroyed my whole perception of the world. I was like, damn, like I couldn't believe she did this or that happened. And it's like, why am I letting that affect me? You know, it was childish. I forgive myself, because it's like, to some extent, it's like you have to have those experiences to grow. But I'm mad at myself because I feel like I projected so much stuff onto her. And I don't know why she took it, to be honest. I don't know why she stayed with me for so long. But, you know, to each his own. But after that relationship, I started to examine so many areas of my life that I felt insecure. And I was like, I don't want to ever feel this way again. So I started to tackle them. I started to become way more reflective. I started reading. I started, you know, whole self-improvement, post-breakup type stuff. And obviously that stuff didn't last. But it lasted for like a good, I'd say 8 months. And then actually a year. It lasted like a year and a half. I'm capping. It did last a decent period. And then as I started healing, I started to have less motivation. But I did start to get close with people. As I started to heal, I started to put myself a bit out there more. I started going to more parties, being more social, taking on more opportunities at school to meet people, talking to people in dorm, stuff like that. And then I think I started to get into a period, especially my junior year of college, where I was like at maximum, like I'm really social, I'm really out there, I'm working for my school social media, so I'm on social media, the school social media, I'm on these dating apps, like I'm really like going against what I used to be in terms of being seclusive, and now I'm like putting myself out there to the maximum extent. You know, I got back on YouTube, like I'm really there. I'm still obviously conscious about what people perceive of me. You know, I'm not posting my YouTube videos on my Instagram or anything. You know, I don't want people at school to necessarily know about this creative side of me, but I do feel like I've become way more out my shell. But my junior year of college, I started getting into so much drama. Oh my God, I can't even go into detail about it. There is so much shit happening last year. And it's really started to get me to this point where I also blew so much money on partying and so many decisions I did, like reckless decisions last year. And this year too, but I'm managing a bit better. But because of the situation last year and also just like arguments I get with people this year, it's making me like reflect on maybe I need to seclude myself more. You know, maybe I need to isolate and go into that hole more. Maybe my younger self knew what was up, and maybe I need to become comfortable with myself. I think that's the moral of the story. I know I've been very vague using these euphemisms and these weird... It's hard for me to explain everything because I need to really update you on my life story, and that would take so long to like talk about. But I don't know. I'm all over the place. But I think like I said, the moral of the story is I'm not comfortable with myself. No matter how many revisions, no matter how many lessons I learn, how much advice I take, there's always a part of me that's dissatisfied. And I think sometimes I look for the answers in other people, or I have expectations of other people because I'm not fully satisfied with them myself. And no matter what that format is, whether it's me not drinking, whether it is me drinking and partying, whether it is me dating or hooking up with people or anything it is, I feel like I'm always chasing the same thing. And the thing with life that I've learned very young is that you'll never be satisfied. So I can go chasing things from other people, but at the end of the day, there will never be an answer. It's all about just learning strategies that make you happier. I generally don't know what I'm gonna title this video. I just yapped about random stuff, but I'm also, to be honest, I have a lot of work I gotta do for my job. So part of me just wants to just talk on camera just to feel better about all the stuff I have to do. But yeah, I appreciate you, Watson. I hope you find some semblance or some comfort in this, and yeah, good night.